Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing a zombie wolf. I wanted to do a wolf, but I didn't want to do a normal werewolf that we always do on Halloween. I wanted to try something a little bit different, so I figured we'd zombify a wolf. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, so I'm going to start on the clay head first, and then I'm going to move on to making the clay feet. So basically I have a pretty decent sized lump of tin foil, and I'm going to start covering this in clay. Normally with this I just make strips of clay and start wrapping it around and then blend it all together. After that, I'm going to start building up the clay where I want the eyes to go because I want them a little bit further apart, and I also want them to face forward, and right now I have no surface to do that with. So I'm going to add some lumps of clay on the sides of the face, and then I'm going to place my eyes where I want them. Now with these eyes, I wanted to have a red one and a white one, mainly because I want scarring to go down one side of the face, so I figured giving a blind eye to that side of the face would make a lot of sense, and then the other side I want to have a red glowing zombie eye. So I'm going to have one red and then one milky white. So I'm going to lay those out, I'm going to add some strips around them and start building up my clay to make the eyelids and just kind of build up the shape of the face around them. While I was working on the eyes, I decided to roughly sketch out where I wanted the scratch to run through the eye. I'm going to add a lot more to it, but I just kind of wanted a basic idea of where my scratches are going to go. After that, I made a very long strip of clay, and I'm going to use this to make the lips. So I'm going to lay this out where I want the mouth to go. This is mainly going to be the upper lip, but I am going to wrap it a little bit under to make a bit of a bottom lip. After I like the placement of this, I'm going to blend it into the rest of the face and then move on to making the nose. So I'm going to add some clay to the very end of the snout and kind of square it off. I want it to be slightly pointed, but not too much. And then I'm going to use my tools to dig into the front of the nose to make the holes for the nostrils, and then kind of shape them because they do kind of go outwards on the sides. Okay, so right now we have a nice symmetrical face, but we're not going to have that for long because we need to mess up one of the sides. So I decided instead of just the one scratch running through the eye that I wanted scarring going down the whole side of the face. So I'm going to take one of my sharp tools and I'm going to cut away some of the clay because I want it to kind of be a little bit more indented. So I'm going to remove as much clay as I can. I don't want to go all the way down to the tin foil, but I do want to get very close. So since these lines are going to be running through his lips, I'm going to have his teeth showing and kind of having the lip curled up a bit where the scar is cutting through. So I'm going to make some teeth first and lay those out. So I'm just going to take even amounts of clay, little balls of clay, and roll them into tiny cones and then lay them back and forth across the side of the face. Okay, so we have the teeth laid out. Now we need to mark out where the lips are going to go again. So I'm going to start taking some strips of clay and marking out where I want them to go. So I decided that I wanted to do 2 extra scratches going down the side of the face. So I'm going to have the lip kind of curl up a little bit where those scratches are. And then I'm going to take another one of my tools and I'm going to mark out the rest of the scratch. Now I'm not going to mess around with the bottom of the face too much because you really aren't going to see it. I want to focus on the top of the face. So I'm going to mark those out. I'm going to make sure I like the position of everything. I'm going to clean up the edge around the base of the head, and then we also need to add some holes for where we're going to connect some ears. And then lastly, I decided I wanted to add a bit of a texture because this side of the face really isn't going to get furred. We want most of it exposed, so I'm going to rough it up a little bit. And then once I'm happy with how the face looks, I'm going to put this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45, maybe 55 minutes. While that's baking, we can start on the feet. Now for the feet, I'm going to try something a little bit different because I want to make him look as zombie-like as I can, and I figured some long, kind of dirty claws would help with that. So I'm actually going to have most of the foot completely covered in fur, so you're not going to see the body of it. You're mainly going to see the claws themselves. So I'm not going to add a ton of detail in the feet. I'm mainly focused on the shape of the claws. But I am going to still build them up the same way that I would with normal feet. So I have a wire frame and I'm going to start covering this in clay. I'm going to cover the portion where all the wires are combined, and then I'm also going to add the claws to the ends of them. After I have that laid out, I'm going to put this in the oven to bake for probably about 25 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. And then once that's out of the oven and is cooled, we can start working on the bottoms of the feet. Now again, I'm not going to add a whole lot of detail to the feet, but I do want to have them as seamless as I can. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to take some strips of clay and we're going to lay those onto the bottom portion of the foot. We're going to blend them into the foot portion where we have that lump of clay, and we're also going to be blending them into the claw. So again, I'm just doing my best to make everything as seamless as I can, and actually we're probably going to have the claws a lot larger in the end than what they look like now. So I'm going to bake this again for another 25 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit, and then once it's out of the oven, I'm going to do the same thing to the tops of the feet. I'm going to take strips of clay. These ones are going to be obviously a little thicker because I want the claws to kind of stick up a bit more, and we're going to blend those into the rest of the feet. So we're going to make sure everything is completely blended nice and smooth. If you want, you can add a texture afterwards, but I just want everything to be as smooth and connected as I can. And then after I get everything blended together, I like the look of the foot. I'm going to put all of these in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about maybe 45 minutes this time. Now at first with this piece, I really wasn't going to add a whole lot of like scary features to it. I wanted the claws, I knew that, and I wanted the scratches on the face. But after I got those clay pieces done, I realized that I wanted to have some spines sticking out, and then I also wanted to make a few ribs sticking out, kind of like he has a giant scratch on the side of his body. So what I'm going to be doing is making a few ribs real quick, and then a few little vertebrae to go down his back. So for the ribs, I'm going to leave them very simple. All the bones are going to be left pretty simple. I'm just going to take a piece of wire, I'm going to take a strip of clay and kind of have it tapered off, and I'm going to run that over the wire and just roughly shape it till it looks a little bit like a pointed rib. Once I like the shape of the rib, I'm going to clean up the edge around the base of it, give it a point for us to glue it onto the body, and then I'm going to make two more. I'm going to have a large, medium, and small rib. Now for the vertebra, I'm not going to be doing too many of them because if I made this piece too long because it is clay and not very flexible, it could crack. So I'm just going to be doing roughly 4 of them. So I'm just going to take a lump of clay, kind of flatten it out, and then I'm going to put some balls of clay on the very top and break those up and kind of roughly indent them to make them look like they're vertebra. So I'm going to get the bones that I made and I'm going to put those in the oven as well. They probably only need roughly about 35 to maybe 40 minutes, not too long. And again, 275 Fahrenheit. Okay, so once all of our clay pieces are done, even our extra ones that we didn't originally plan for, and they're nice and cool to the touch, we can start painting. So the color of the fur that I'm going to use for my wolf is going to be black. I know everything is black since it's October, but yeah. Anyways, if you want, you could actually do a gray and that would look really cool as well, and you can kind of dingy it up a bit, but I just wanted to go with black. And so what that means is we're going to have to primer our whole face black. So I'm going to cover up the whole face. I'm going to do my best to not get any of the paint on the eyes, mainly because resin is a little harder to peel the paint off. It does stick a bit more, and also my tools tend to scratch it when I remove the paint. So I'm just going to be a little bit more careful going around the eyes and get the rest of the face completely covered. And then you want to make sure that your black layer is completely dry because we're going to be using lighter tones over this, and if you put lighter paint on black paint that's still wet, it's going to turn gray. So I'm going to be taking a white and going over the teeth that we have. So I'm going to completely cover those up, just kind of rough them up a bit. I don't want to paint into the cracks. I want the black to stay in between the cracks of the teeth to help define them. So I'm going to get that done, and then I'm also going to kind of add a bit of a gray touch to the side of the face that has all the scars and stuff. Now with the painting for this, I'm not really going to mess around with the other side of the face. It's mainly going to be this one side because the rest of it is going to get covered in fur and you're not going to see anything on this. The main reason I'm just painting it black is because I don't want any of the white clay to peek through the black fabric that we add on top. So for the side of the face that we're mainly focusing on, I'm going to start adding some grays to it to kind of lighten it up. I'm not going to go into any of the cracks or anything because I do want those to be darker, and I'm just going to kind of go over that. I'm going to start adding different colors here and there, like kind of darker oranges, reds, pinks, maybe a bit more gray here and there. I just want it to look kind of muddy and dirty. So again, I'm just going to keep messing around with it until I like how it looks. I'm going to add some white highlights to it here and there and just kind of keep blending everything together until it looks right. And then I'm going to let that dry, and then after that's dried, I'm going to take a very bright red and I'm going to go into the cracks of the scratches. And I'm going to paint all of those. And then lastly, I don't really want the nose to just disappear into the face since everything is going to be so black, so I'm going to add some browns to it to make it stick out just a little bit. Okay, so I really like how the face looks. I'm going to go set this aside to dry and then we can start working on the claws. Okay, so for the claws, I want them to kind of stand out a little bit, so I'm going to primer them with a gray, that way they're a little bit lighter than everything else. So I'm going to get that painted, I'm going to let it dry a little bit, and then the base of the foot I'm going to go over with a black. I'm going to try and blend that into the gray just a little bit, that way it's just not a sudden switch from gray to black. I want it to fade just a little bit. And then I'm going to lighten this up by going over it a little bit with a lighter gray, so I'm going to kind of whitewash over the claws, and then I'm going to also add a bit of a khaki color to make them look a bit dirty. And then honestly, that's all that I'm going to do to them. I think they look really good. Again, most of the foot portion is going to get completely covered in fur, so you're not going to see that. And then after the claws, we're going to move on to painting our bones. So I'm going to be doing something very simple with these, but it makes a really good bone effect. At least this is how I like doing my bones. So basically, I'm just going to paint over them with a black. I'm going to cover the whole surface of them, and really quickly after I get everything completely covered, I'm going to take a damp paper towel and I'm going to wipe away any excess paint. This will kind of give it a nice dingy effect, and it'll make all the little cracks and crevices fill in with the black paint. And that's basically how I paint bones. I really like this effect. It's super simple and you can do it really quickly. Okay, so that's all the painting for all of our clay pieces. I'm going to let them dry, and then after they've dried, I'm going to mix up some resin and paint it over all of the surfaces that we want exposed. So for the claws, I just need to paint over the claws, and for the face, we're just going to be painting over the details that are going to stick out and not get covered in fur. So like the eyes, nose, the scars, and stuff like that. Those are going to have to cure overnight because resin takes forever to dry, and while that's going on, we can work on our sewing for the body. Okay, so for the sewing, I drew out a very simple pattern, and I'm going to use this to cut out my fabric. I'm going to be using a black fur fabric, and I'm going to get all my pieces cut out. So the first thing that I'm working on is the left and right of the body piece. I'm going to sew these together and I'm going to sew them down the back portion. I'm going to leave the belly open for when we put everything together and close it all up. So I'm going to sew those two pieces together, and then I'm going to start on the tail. For the tail, I just have one pattern piece. I'm going to fold it in half and sew down that one side. I'm going to then flip it right side out and add a little bit of stuffing to the bottom portion of the tail. And then for the legs, we're going to do the same thing to the front legs and the back legs. We have an inside portion for the leg and an outside portion for the leg. And we're going to take those pieces, we're going to sandwich them together with the fur on the inside, and we're going to sew down just the fronts of them. We're going to do this to all four of the legs. The reason we're leaving the back portion open is it just makes it easier to add them to the body later, and then we can close them up and stuff them once they're on the body. Now before we start putting everything together, I am going to go back to the body piece and we're going to change this up a little bit because I need to have that one scar where the ribs are going to stick through. So I'm going to take some kind of dark, kind of burgundy red fabric, and we're going to kind of draw out where we want that to go. And we're going to have all the scars and stuff on one side of the wolf. So I'm going to double check that I'm on the correct side of the body, so I have all the scarring on the same side, and then I'm going to draw out where I want that scar to go and cut away the excess fabric. I'm then going to take my burgundy fabric and I'm going to glue that in place on the back side of the fur fabric. It's kind of like patching up your jeans or something. If you want, you can also sew it into place, but my glue works just fine for this. And then we're also going to be adding the vertebra right now, so I'm going to cut a portion for those and I'm going to glue them in place as well. So we're going to have to let that dry for a little bit, but once it's dry, we can start putting our wolf together. So I'm going to start with my wireframe. I made a very simple one. The only thing different than most of my wireframes is I had to reinforce the front portion a little bit because the head was kind of heavy. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the tail that we made and we're going to slide it over the wire for the tail. And then we're going to take our body piece and we're going to cut some tiny little holes for the wires for the legs to go through, and we're going to run this over the wireframe. Then we're going to take our clay head and we're going to glue this to the wire for the neck. We're going to let that dry for a little bit, and then we're going to take the fabric for the neck and start gluing it around the base of the head. And then once that's dried, we're going to take our needle and thread and start sewing and closing up the body. While we're doing this, we're going to be stuffing it as well. And we're just going to sew all the way down the belly until we get to the tail. Okay, so we have the body put together. Now before we add the legs to this, I want to shave up the fur fabric, and I want to shave it pretty short. So I'm going to take my hair trimmer and I'm going to go down the sides of the wolf. I'm not going to mess with the belly or the back too much, I'm just going to kind of blend it in so it's not so choppy. So I'm just going to be shaving the sides of the wolf. I'm going to get the fur as short as I can without you seeing the backing. So I'm going to use my smallest guard after I get through all of the thick fur, and then we're going to mess around with adding the ribs. So for the ribs, I'm going to cut some tiny little holes and I'm going to push those in and glue them into place. Now I noticed that they kind of stuck up a little bit, and I didn't want that obviously because they were sticking out way too much. So at first I decided to try and glue them to the sides of the body, and it really didn't work out. So I ended up just taking a needle and thread and sewing them down. So sewing the ribs into place left a little bit of a string going over the tops of the ribs, and it doesn't look that bad, but I am going to cover up this later, but I want to get the rest of the body put together first. Anyways, we're going to start on the back legs first, and then we'll move on to the front. So I'm going to sew the fabric for the back legs into place. I'm going to make sure they're nice and even, and then we can add the clay legs to the wire frame. So to add the clay legs to the wire frame, I'm going to take a 20 gauge wire and I'm going to wrap the leg into place on the other wire for the wire frame. So the wires that are sticking out of the back of the clay leg, we're going to use those to connect it to the wire frame. So we're going to get that nice and secure, and then we can take the fabric for the legs and start gluing it around the bases of the feet. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then once that's dried, we can stuff the back of the leg and close it up. And then after we have the legs put together, I'm going to take my hair trimmer again, and we're going to start going over the back legs with it. Now the way that I want to shave the legs for the wolf is I want the main body of the leg, the more upper portion, to be very short like the sides of the body, and then the base of the legs where the claws are to be very long and fluffy. So I'm going to get the back legs all shaved up, and then we're going to move on to adding the front legs. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sew the fabric for the legs into place, and then we're going to take our clay feet, add those to the wire frame, glue the fabric around the bases of them, and then we're going to stuff and close them up. And then of course we're going to shave them just like we did with the back legs. Okay, so the body is mostly done. Now we're going to move on to the face. So I need to fur the face, and I also need to add some ears to it. So I'm going to take some cut pieces of fur fabric to fit portions of the face that are very large, and I'm going to glue those into place, and then I'm going to glue some felt ears into place that I made earlier. So I'm going to get that fur glued into place along with the ears. I'm going to let it dry a little bit, and then we're going to get some fur trimmings and cover up the rest of the face. Now the side of the face that doesn't have any of the scars, we're going to completely fur and get that completely covered, but the side with the scars, we're just going to kind of frame around the scars and try and blend the fur into it. So we don't want to cover up any of our detail, obviously, we just want it to blend in and kind of look like a balding spot. So I'm mainly just adding fur in between the scratches. So I'm going to get the face completely furred. I'm going to use my tools to kind of move the fur around to get it in the position that I want, and then I'm going to let it dry. While that's drying, I'm going to finish up the last little detail that we need, and that's to cover up those strings on the ribs. So what I did to kind of cover this up is I cut a piece of felt. I took a burgundy color, and I'm going to glue this over those strings. Honestly, this actually looks a lot better doing it this way than just having the ribs stick out. I really like it. Okay guys, and that's how I made a zombie wolf. I had so much fun with this project, especially doing his scars and stuff like that. I thought it was a lot of fun, and in a weird way, I think he kind of looks cute. Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, I'm gonna have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so check the links down below if you want to buy anything. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, and before I forget, there is a vlog tomorrow. Don't forget to keep an eye out for my art vlogs. Okay, bye!